Imagine you wake up every morning not knowing if your paycheck will be worth the same by Friday. So the price of milk goes up, gas goes up, your loan payments go up. You can't start a business because the bank won't give you a loan at a rate you cannot afford. This was everyday America in 1980, and one man stood up and said, I know how to fix this. We are talking about President Ronald Reagan, the man who stood up in 1980 and fought in the 1980 election against Jimmy Carter, the man who brought America back to life, the man who fixed the economy for good. So today we will be talking about Ronald Reagan's Reaganomic plans, what it was, how it affected American economy, and how America was changed forever. So the first thing, Reagan won the 1980 election and took his office in January 1981. But let's talk about what America actually looked like before he got there, because you need to understand the pain first to understand how it was fixed. So, for years under President Ford and Carter, America had been stuck in a cycle of slow economic growth. High unemployment, high inflation at the same time. There was even a term for it, stagflation. Normally, an economy grows too fast and gets inflation or slows down. America somehow had both at the same time. So prices had climbed nearly 50% in just 4 years under Carter's administration. Annual inflation hits 13.5%. In comparison, we had the 2021 and 2022 inflation that was up to 9%, and everything went really bad. Imagine 13.5%. Now, think about if you made $40,000 a year. Your money was losing value faster than you could spend it. Unemployment was sitting at 7% in 1980. Interest rates on mortgages were through the roof. Starting a business, buying a house, getting a car loan, all of it was brutal. The Federal Reserve was already trying to fix inflation by raising interest rates sky high. By December 1980, the Fed funds hit the rate at 20%. That's not a typo. 20%. Imagine how bad that is. And our government is fighting right now to bring it down from 4%. At that time, it was 20%. So obviously, nobody was borrowing money at those rates. America was demoralized. Reagan called it a crisis of confidence, and he came in with a completely different playbook. So now let's talk about what was Reaganomics' philosophy. How did he manage to fix the economy? What was he proposing to the American people? So Reagan, whose belief was simple, government is not the solution, government is the problem. So he thought Washington had been taking too much from the people, regulating too much and spending too much, and that was strangling the economy. His program for economic recovery had four pillars: reduce the government spending growth, cut tax rates for income tax and labor and capital, slash regulations on businesses, and control the money supply to beat inflation. This was called supply side economics. Give businesses and workers more of their own money, let them invest and grow, and the whole economy rises. Critics called it trickle down effect. Economic supporters called it freedom. Now, what you might be thinking is what actually happened. What was Reaganomics? How did it help the United States economy? So here's what was it actually Reaganomics step by step. So the first thing that was in Reaganomics that was the biggest thing was tax cuts. So in August 1981, Reagan signed the Economic Recovery Tax Act. It proposed a personal income tax rate in the annual installment of 5, 10, and 10%, and dropped the top tax rate from 70% down to 50%. That was his first proposal. From 70% down to 50%, that was a top tax rate. So yeah, let that sink in. The government was taking 70% of every dollar the top earners made. And Reagan said that was insane. So the money should go back to the economy and let people work on their own to grow the economy. By the end of his presidency, the top tax rate was 28%. He dropped it down even further, almost 50% more. And anyone earning below a certain threshold paid 0% federal income tax. Now, the second thing that was in his Reaganomics philosophy was deregulation. So, regulations were relaxed or removed altogether in his administration. This was an environment that rewarded hard work and calculated risk taking. Businesses could actually move, expand, hire without drawing in paperwork and government rules. Now, the third thing was supporting the Fed. Reagan backed Volcker at the Federal Reserve even when it was painful. Controlling inflation was a non negotiable situation that both the Fed and the government had to work together on. So, with that being said, that mandatory discipline brought annual inflation down from 13.5% in 1980 to 4.1% in 1988. So, a big inflation reduction from a recession that was going on in the US. Now, would you think that with all this tax rates, deregulation, and everything, did everything get better altogether? No, nothing got better altogether. Everything got worse before it got better. So the recession of 1981 to 1982 hit hard. Unemployment rose to 10.1% and stayed above 10% for 10 straight months. Business failures hit an all-time high since 1930s. Now, Reagan's approval rating did come down drastically. By early 1983, it had dropped to 35%. People were furious. The 1982 midterms punished the Republicans. Democrats gained 26 House seats, and they were 12 points ahead of Republicans. But Reagan didn't blink. He said the medicine is working, give it time, and then something remarkable happened. Now, here's the part that everyone looks at. Here's the part that everyone hears. And here's the part that, actually I'm excited about to read also. I was excited to learn, and I was really happy to hear this. So, recovery began in late 1982, and that followed was one of the greatest economic booms in American history. So, the first part is jobs, millions of them. Over 20 million jobs were created across 8 years in Reagan's economy. More than half of those new jobs went to women. African American employment rose 25% from 1982 to 1988. It rose by 25%. So that's a big thing. That's not just a statistic, that's 20 million families with paychecks. 20 million people with purpose, with structure, and dignity to work. The paychecks actually grew. So the middle class income increased 11% after adjusting for inflation. The percentage of household earning over $50,000 jumped from 17.6% in 1988 to 23.5% by 1989. Millions of families moved up. That's not the rich getting richer. That's everyday Americans climbing to a higher income bracket. Now, after the paychecks, the next thing is the misery index. There was a concept called the misery index. You add the employment rate and the inflation rate together, and you get a sense of how much pain everyday Americans are feeling. So, under the Carter administration, it was off the charts. Under Reagan's administration, he substantially reduced the misery index, driving down both unemployment and interest rates that had eaten up Americans for years. So, the stock market exploded. Between 1967 and 1982, the Dow Jones had actually declined by 23% in real terms, meaning for 15 years, the average investor could have literally been better off keeping cash under a mattress. All that changed after 1982. When the market began to ascend, that wouldn't really end until 2000. A new entrepreneur spirit. So, lower inflation encouraged more personal consumer spending. As people had more money in their pockets and left more confident, lower taxes and less regulation boosted business and encouraged more calculated risk taking, creating an entrepreneur spirit as investors gained confidence. So, this is the era that birthed the tech industry as we know it. The government gets out of the way and lets people breathe. They build things. They open up businesses, open up stores, and help the economy grow in even faster. So, at the end of his administration, the US had experienced the longest peacetime economic expansion ever recorded. The stagflation that had killed Americans from 1983 to 1980 was transformed into a sustained period of high growth and lower inflation. So Reagan won re-election in 1984 in one of the biggest landslides in American history, carrying 49 out of the 50 states. The people had their verdict. People said that Reaganomics were better by their votes. That's why Reagan got 49 out of the 50 states. Now, look, no policy is perfect. The national debt did grow and went up significantly. And there were Americans who didn't feel the boom the same way. But when you zoom out and look at the big picture, at the jobs, at the income, at the inflation, and the confidence that came back to everyday American families, Reaganomics delivered. It gave back to the American people. It took a country that felt broken and turned it into an economic powerhouse of the world again. And it was his administration who did work to bring down the tensions from the Cold War. So, me personally, I believe that Reaganomics is best. I believe that we can work it in 2026 to fix the economy because everything that's happening right now happened in 1980. Foreign affairs were really bad. It's happening in 2026. We have went into a war. At that time, we were also in Cold War. The taxes are a bit high. I think we can bring them down. We can lower regulations and we can give interest free loans to ensure that people have money to start up businesses. The only thing is for tariffs that Reagan didn't implement or didn't have much thought on, we are doing today. And that's something new that we can, test and see properly. But besides that, we can put Reaganomics back into 2026, and I believe it would do a much better job than Biden's administration or Trump's administration. So, with all that being said, that's Reaganomics' story. That's what President Reagan did for America. That's everything that he proposed and got done for American people. So you can go ahead and drop your thoughts in the comment section. And do you think it would work today? You personally, me, I think it would work. But if you think it would work, go ahead and let me know in the comments below. I might even make a prediction video of what would have happened if Reaganomics would be implemented today. But go ahead, comment below if you guys would like to see a video like that, and make sure to subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Have a nice day.